Does a similar process occur for moons and other satellites that orbit a planet as far as formation is concerned? So, like, what sorts of factors determine whether this material that's floating around will become a planet or an asteroid rather than a planetary satellite?
Well, so the first question, of course, is the orbit, right? Is it an orbit around the planet or is it an orbit around the star? And the boundary lies at something called the Hill radius, right? Each planet has a radius around it where if you go beyond it, you will orbit the sun rather than the planet itself. So that's number one. And the second one is just like the cumulative amount of mass that you have in the population of planetesimals or satellite animals. Right? If the amount of mass is sufficient, it will, given time, coagulate into a planet or a satellite. If it's insufficient, like the asteroid belt, for example, right? The asteroid belt is about 1/1000th of the mass of the Earth, right? It'll never form a planet. It's just pathetic, right? Just the asteroid belt is just, why is it even there?
Yeah. I'm wondering now, do we actually have any satellite animals that maybe your former countrymen sent up, like dogs or
It's a
cats?
good question. Yeah. I mean, they used to send up cats, and I think not cats, because cats are hard to take data from, right? But like
They're
they
not
certainly
cooperative.
sent up some dogs.
Yeah,
No,
and
no. In
some.
fact, I'm very impressed with your cat. Like your cat's been, I don't know if it's sedated or what, but
No, no.
it's an
She's
impressive amount of attention span.
so I interviewed Noam Chomsky for episode 66. That was in March or so, and that was obviously the most exciting interview I had done to that point, other than I interviewed my uncle about his favorite ice creams very early on. But after that, it was Noam Chomsky. And my cat decided to be as crazy as possible during that interview. So the entire time, she was just running around, and I was so distracted, just like trying to get her off and away from the camera. So since then, I have honed a strategy in which exactly like 30 minutes before an interview, I open up a fresh can of her favorite food, and then she eats that, is really excited for like 20 minutes, and then if all goes well, we'll just sleep in my lap in a food coma. So that's where we're at right now, which is
Yeah, I
great.
mean, I can relate to that. Yeah, that makes sense. That's what I did before this interview. I ate a little cat food, and now just like prevents me from
Just chilling
acting
now.
out. Yeah, just chilling. Yeah, it just makes sense. It just works. Yeah, what were we talking about again? We're satellite animals. Yeah, so surely there's some dogs that got sent out that never came back. Um, maybe
All right.
even a
Well, we got
chimp.
some then.
Yeah, that's right. It's a bit of a bummer. And by bit, I mean
Yeah,
like
it's
quite
sad.
a considerate bummer. Yeah. I mean, imagine just being that dog. Just like first you feel this extreme acceleration, then you're just like floating, and eventually you kind of run out of oxygen. It's not a good way to go.
No, it's not. It is very sad. So we should leave satellite animals as like a very fun typography concern, and leave it at that, and actually hope that there are no future satellite animals unless they are happily housed in some sort of
Yeah.
satellite
Unless they want
facility
to
that's
go.
like dog
That's right.
driven. Yeah, yeah. My dog would be happy to go if I went, for sure. Um,
Oh,
but
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Just makes
do
sense. Yeah.
do do moons form differently around gassy planets than they do smaller Earth-like planets? Because I mean, there are so many more moons around. They do. There are so many more moons around our gassy planets than Earth, for instance.
Yeah. So I think that the formation of the kind of big satellites of Jupiter and Saturn is kind of like the formation of the solar system scaled down, right? Happening at a smaller scale. The kind of tiny, pathetic moons of Saturn that are all like kind of 100 kilometers across, I think those come from the rings. They're a bit of a different story. But the big ones, right? For Jupiter, this will be Io, Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, right? Kind of things that are 1,000 kilometers in radius. Those are almost certainly forming like the planets. Conversely, right, the formation of the moon came from a giant impact. Right? It was a Mars-sized body that struck the Earth and created the moon in that process. It's a violent and stochastic process, a kind of collision, as opposed to the more kind of gradual accretion of the moons in case of the giant planets.
Okay. Well, last broad formation question I had before we move on to the ninth planet. Is there an theoretically interesting answer to the question of when planet or satellite formation ends in a solar system or around a particular planet? Or is it really just the answer is that when most of the material in a solar system has become compacted by gravity and then their orbits become stable, that's just when it ends?
It's really the latter, but that's an interesting answer in its own right, because that timescale can be very different from system to system.
So does much of your work, because what I saw, a lot of your work is really geared around our solar system, but as we are discovering more and more exoplanetary systems, are you increasingly looking at those for guidance?
Absolutely. I would say the last 3 papers that I've published, this year that I've led are mostly about extrasolar planets. So yeah, they present an important parallel kind of line of inquiry to the study of the solar system that makes sure that you don't get stuck in an overly constrained world, right? Like it's easy to, when you have a sample size of 1, it's easy to come up with the just so story that explains why the solar system looks the way it looks and blah, 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 blah. And you end up creating a story that's so constrained that it's not battle tested against the kind of broader context of the galactic planetary systems. It's very useful to ask the question of whatever theory you come up with for the formation of the solar system or whatever, does it work in all contexts, right? A good theory should yield, I don't know, the satellites of Jupiter and the typical extrasolar planetary systems and the solar system, all as special cases of that theory, right? And if it doesn't do that, if it fails to explain, at least in a semi-quantitative way, everything, then you're on the wrong track.